A child brought to its mother a piece of ice and asked, "What is this?" The mother answered, "It is ice." Again the child asked, "What is there in ice?" The mother answered, "There is water in the ice." The child desired to find the water in the ice, and it procured a hammer, pounded the piece of ice into little bits, and the warm air soon changed all the ice to water. The child was grievously disappointed, for the ice that the child supposed contained water had disappeared. And the child said, "Where is the ice that contained this water?" And so it came to pass that the mother was compelled, by the child's persistent questions, to say, "Ice is all water. There is no such thing as ice. That which we call ice is crystallized or frozen water." The child understood. A student brought to his teacher some water and asked, "What is water? What does it contain?" The teacher answered, "Water contains oxygen and hydrogen," and then explained how the two gases might be separated and set free by heat. The student boiled the water until all of the molecules of oxygen and hydrogen had been set free. But he was surprised to find that all of the water had disappeared. Then the student asked of the teacher, "Where is the water that held the gases that have escaped?" Then was the teacher compelled by the student's persistent questions to answer, "Water itself is the product of oxygen and hydrogen. Water does not contain anything other than these gases. In reality, there is no such substances or fluid as water. That which we name water is a rate of motion set in operation by the union of two parts of hydrogen with one part of oxygen, and, of course, the phenomenon disappears when the union of the gases is broken." The student understood. A devout scientist presented himself before God and said, "Lord, what are these gases men call oxygen and hydrogen?" The good Lord answered and said, "They are molecules in the blood and body of the universe." Then spake the scientist, "Lord, wilt thou tell me of the kind of molecules that compose thy blood and body?" The Lord replied, "These same molecules, gases or principles, compose my blood and body. For I and the universe are one and the same." Once again the scientist said, "My Lord, may I ask, then, what is spirit and what is matter?" And thus answered the Lord, "As ice and water are one, and the gases and water are one, so is spirit and matter one. The different phases and manifestations cognized by man in the molecules of my body, that is, the universe, are caused by the Word. Thus, they are my thoughts clothed with form." Now the scientist felt bold, being redeemed from fear, and asked, "Is my blood, then, identical with thy blood in composition and divine essence?" And the Lord said, "Yea, thou art one with the Father." The scientist now understood and said, "Now mine eyes are opened and I perceive that, when I eat, I partake of thy body, when I drink of thy blood, and when I breathe thy spirit." So-called matter is pure intelligence and nothing else, because there is not anything else. Pure intelligence cannot progress or become better. There is nothing but intelligence. Omnipresence, omnipotence, omniscience must mean intelligence. Therefore these terms are all included in the word. Let us adopt a short word that will express all that the above written words are intended to express, namely, the word IT. I stand for all the eternal I. T stands for operation, manifestation, vibration, action or motion. The I in motion is T, or crossification, the T-cross. We say, IT reigns. It is cold. It is all right. What do we mean by it? Who knows? Some say, the weather. Others, natural phenomena. Very well. Then what do we mean by the weather, or natural phenomena? Why, just it, of course. It does not progress. It does not need to. It forever manifests, operates, differentiates and presents different aspects or viewpoints of itself. But these different phases are neither good, better nor best, neither bad nor worse, simply different shades and colorings of the one and only intelligence. Every so-called thing, whether it be animal, vegetable or mineral, molecule or atom, ion or electron, is the result of the one intelligence expressing itself in different rates of motion. Then what is spirit? Spirit means breath or life. Spirit, that which is breathed into man, must be intelligence, or man would not be intelligent. Non-intelligent substance, which is, of course, unthinkable, would not breathe into anything, nor make it intelligent if it did. Therefore, we see that spirit, intelligence and matter are one and the same as in different rates of motion. So-called molecules, atoms, electrons, know what to do. They know where and how to cohere, unite and operate to form a leaf or a flower. They know how to separate and disintegrate that same leaf or flower. These particles of omnipresent life build planets, suns and systems. They hurl the comet on its way across measureless deserts of stardust and emboss its burning path. From the materialistic and individual concept of life and its operations, it is pitiable and pathetic to view the wrecks along the shores of science. It is only when we view these apparently sad failures from the firm foothold of the unity of being and the operation of wisdom that we clearly see in these frictions and warring elements and temporary defeats and victories the chemical operation of eternal spirit operating with its own substance, its very self. It is only through the fires of transmutation that we are enabled to see that all life is one eternal life and therefore cannot be taken, injured, or destroyed. The fitful, varying, changing beliefs of men in the transition stage from the sleep and dreams of materialism to the realization of the oneness of spirit show forth in a babel of words and theories, a few of which I shall briefly consider, beginning with the yet popular belief in evolution. The evolutionary concept has its starting point in the idea that matter so-called is a something separate from mind, intelligence, or spirit. Be that this matter had a beginning, see that it contains within itself the desire to progress or improve, and, finally, that the race is progressing, becoming wiser, better, etc. Against this assumption, I submit the proposition that the universe one verse always existed without beginning or ending and is and always has been absolutely perfect in all its varied manifestations and operations. A machine is no stronger than its weakest part. If the self-existing universe is weak or imperfect in any part, it must, of necessity, always have been so. Having all the knowledge there is, being all it is, unthinkable that there is any imperfection anywhere. Everything we see, feel, or taste, or in any manner sense, is perfect substance, condensed or manifested from perfect elements, but all differ in their notes, vibrations, or modes or rates of motion. A serpent is as perfect, therefore as good, as a man. Without feet, it outruns a man. Without hands, it outclimbs the ape, and has been a symbol of wisdom through all the ages. Man is an evil thing to the serpent's consciousness. Neither are evil nor good. They are different expressions or variations of the play of the infinite will. The brain of the jellyfish is composed of the same elements, of the same substance as the brain of a man, merely of a different combination. Can man tell what the jellyfish is thinking, or why it moves and manifests its energy thus or so? How, then, is man wiser than the jellyfish because his thoughts are of a different nature and operate to different ends? Wisdom all there is simply operates, manifests, expresses forms, or creates them, of self-existing substance. As wisdom is without beginning or end, so are all its operations or manifestations without beginning or end. Modern man is now taking his first lessons in condensing or materializing air, while through unnumbered ages the spider has performed the miracle without the necessity of first attending a school of chemistry. The modus operandi by which the spider forms his web from air is the despair of science. The wisdom of the ant or beaver strikes dumb all the believers in the Darwinian dream. The perfect cooperative commonwealth of the bees is still the unattained ideal of man. Beneath the soil upon which falls the shadow of the throne of Menelik, the Abyssinian king, are layers and strata of buried civilizations, and astronomers in China mapped the heavens, named the stars, calculated the eclipses and the return of comets ages before Moses led the Hebrews out of bondage, or the walls of Baalbek cast the shade for the Arab and his camel. The evidences and witnesses of the wisdom of men on earth hundreds of thousands of years ago confront the scientific investigator at every turn. Here the Rosetta Stone, and there the inscribed cylinder of Arioch or statue of Gideon, king of Chaldea. Prophecies, inscribed on cuneiform tablets of clay, foretelling the building of the pyramids, are brought to light by the excavator, and the history of the Chinese Empire, running back in links of an unbroken chain for 150,000 years, forever refute the theory of the descent of man. Side by side with the ancient Asiatics, who knew all that we today know, dwelt the crystal, the cell, the jellyfish, the saurian, the ape and the caveman. Side by side with the masons, who could build arches of stone in ancient Yucatan that mock at the ravages of time, lived and wrought the ant, operating in its cooperative commonwealth of which man can still only dream. Side by side with the cavemen and cannibals dwells the spider, whose operation in aerial elements is the despair of chemical investigators. And when Solomon's golden-spired temple illuminated the holy city, or the Tower of Babel grew toward the clouds, or the mound builders recorded their history in rock and soil, the eagle and the dove calmly floated in the air and wondered when men would evolve to their plane of science. They are wondering still. Exponents of the evolutionary theory never tire in quoting Professor Huxley. One who has not read the writings of this eminent scientist would be led to believe by the statements of his followers that he had positive views on the great question of force and matter. Following is an extract from a letter written by Professor Huxley to Charles Kingsley, under date of May 22 ND, 1863, taken from the published letters of Huxley by his son, Leonard. I don't know whether matter is anything distinct from force. I don't know that atoms are anything but pure myths. Cogito ergo sum is to my mind a ridiculous piece of bad logic. All I can say at any time being cogito. The Latin form I hold to be preferable to the English. You think? because the latter asserts the existence of an ego about which the bundle of phenomena at present addressing you knows nothing. I believe in Hamilton, Mansell and Herbert Spencer, so long as they are destructive, and laugh at their beards as soon as they try to spin their own cobwebs. Is this basis of ignorance broad enough for you? If you, theologian, can find as firm footing as one, man of science, do on this foundation of minus naught, there will be naught to fear for our ever diverging. For you see, I am quite as ready to admit your doctrine that souls secrete bodies as I am the opposite one, that bodies secrete souls, simply because I deny the possibility of obtaining any evidence as to the truth or falsehood of either hypothesis. My fundamental axiom of speculative philosophy is that materialism and spiritualism are opposite poles of the same absurdity, the absurdity of imagining that we knew anything about either spirit or matter. Huxley admitted that he did not know. The word infinite defines an endless differentiation of concept. If the spiritual consciousness, the mighty angel that the clairvoyant seer, John the Revelator, saw descending out of the heavens, shall carry away the pillars of material evolution, a temple of truth divinely fair will spring, phoenix-like, to take its place. Eyes shall then be opened and ears unstopped. Man will then realize that the so-called lower forms of life are just as complex, wonderful and difficult to form as the organism of man, that protoplasm is as wonderful in any other form as in the frame matter of the human brain, which is only another form of its expression, that the molecular composition of a jellyfish puzzles the greatest chemist, and the wisdom of a beaver is enough to strike dumb all the believers in the Darwinian fairy tale. And has the dream of good and evil any better foundation than has this one of material evolution? We are here to solve the problems of life, not to evade them, and to name the mighty operations of eternal wisdom. Good and evil is simply evading instead of solving. The universal principle, spirit, or God, is impartial. Saint and sinner are one in the eternal mind. God, or infinite life, is not in the least injured by so-called good or evil. The spiritual ego is the interested party and must work out its own salvation. There is no point in the universe better, higher, or nearer God, or the center, than any other point. All places are necessary, and no one is favored over any other. As Huxley well said, good and evil are opposite poles of the same absurdity. Good must have evil for its opposite, if it exists at all. He who would realize being must get rid of the concept of good, as well as the concept of evil. Good and evil are qualifications, and being does not admit of qualification or grades. It simply is. The ideal we call good eternally exists, but its name is wisdom's operations. Nothing is low or high, good or bad, except to that individual concept which allows comparison. Comparisons are odious. Physical science, so-called, declares in its textbooks that light travels from the sun to the earth in 8 minutes, a distance of about 95 million miles. To question this statement a few years ago meant ostracism from the circle of the elect who knew things. But today the iconoclast stands at the gate of the temples of learning and batters at the walls with the hammer of Thor. Fear and trembling seize upon the votaries of material gods as they see evolution, progression, the theories of electricity, light and heat, good and evil, all cast into the crucible of truth for transmutation in the divine alchemy of being, all dissolving as pieces of ice of different sizes and shapes change to water. The present-day chemist, as he begins to tread the soil where stood the ancient alchemist, tells us that light and heat are simply the rates of motion of a substance that does not travel from star to star or from sun to planet, but vibrates in its place at rates directed by the eternal word. This substance, aerial or etheric, does not travel, it is everywhere present, the body of omnipresent being. Men now dare assert that there is no evidence that the sun is hot, but that there is evidence that the sun is the dynamo of the solar system, and so vibrates the etheric substance that light, heat, cold, and gravitation are produced not as entities separate from the universal elements, but as results or effects produced by different rates of motion of the molecules of the wire molecular motion or of the air or etheric substance, as in wireless telegraphy.